yeah, to get this conversation started. And so I know we have a big agenda for today. Welcome, Councilmember Bonds. And so I'm going to turn it over to Don to get us started.
Rev, we'll come back around to it. I thank you for bringing it up, and no attempt is being made to exclude anything. So we'll revisit. Okay, well, first of all, let me just say good morning to everyone. I see that we're already up to 38 participants. That's very encouraging after so many meetings. This is our next to last Strike Force meeting. The final meeting will be next Thursday. And I think that meeting is probably, going to be scheduled for the full 2 hours, as this is going to be the week in which we finalize our draft, presumably with your input. It's also the last week where we'll be having working group meetings. The supply working group will meet this afternoon at 1 o'clock, as we have, I'm sorry, at noon, as we have been meeting. So what we're here to do today is basically bring everybody hopefully current as to status. We're going to start with a presentation from Tim on the results of the town meeting and the other community engagement. We're going to also then follow with Anna talking about the draft goal that we began to talk about and zero in on last week. As you know, that's one of our charges, to make a recommendation around a goal. And then Anna is going to walk us through the draft recommendations that were sent out late yesterday morning. One of the things that you should know is that, of course, what we've been doing is taking in more input, creating a parking lot. We're going to keep that parking lot open until after the supply working group meeting at 12. And then we're going to iterate a new draft of recommendations that will be put in your hands as early next week as possible. And I emphasize early, so you will have more than enough time, hopefully, to review and digest as we move towards the final meeting on Thursday. So with that, before we move into the actual, meat of what we're doing today, I want to give an opportunity to our co-chairs, our erstwhile and steadfast co-chairs, to welcome you and to set the tone for this meeting today. Reverend Hagler, Director Cozart, welcome. Good to see you again. Over to you.
Good to see you all as well. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Looking forward to our discussion today, hearing a little bit about the engagement that we've had thus far. One of my takeaways from the town hall that we had, I was really encouraged by how many people attended. I was also encouraged kind of looking at the survey results, understanding how there are many of the challenges and also potential solutions that were raised that have been part of our working group discussion. So it was good to hear some additional kind of affirmation of some of the topics and some of the recommendations that we've identified to kind of hear that alignment. And I'm excited about getting to a place of consensus, making sure that we have not overlooked anything major, and that for those things we quickly get that in with our recommendations, and just hearing from all the Strike Force members about where you feel like we're at given this point. So I'm gonna have my ears open for hearing from you all. So thank you. Over to you, my fearless co-chair.
Good morning. I'm not feeling too well this morning. I feel like I'm being played. Feel like I'm being played. The town hall meeting, I got calls from preachers who felt that it was a sham. because they couldn't get in there. They weren't respected. There was no dialogue. There was no openness to it. It was something that was being presented almost as a monologue. That was not a town hall meeting. That was an indoctrination. I got problems with that. I got problems with the way the process is taking place because there seems to be a shadow government behind this process. And right now, I'm not in a place of being conducive to what's going on. Somebody's got to prove to me that this is a legitimate process, that we're actually going to entertain the voices in a real way, rather than set up a process to get the answers that we want to get. That's where I am.
All right, so I think what I hear is an integrity question. And I always take integrity questions very seriously, starting with my own integrity. So I think what we have to do now is, if you will agree, I'd like to proceed with the agenda as planned, get through the presentations, and then get to our discussion period. And then I'm going to ask you to come back and deal with the implications of what you just said. Because, all right, everybody has a point of view, but it's really what is the implications behind the point of view. And I'm still seeking the thing that I've always been seeking, and that's consensus within the group. And you've now called that into question in a pretty clear way. So I'd like to recommend that as an approach, if that's acceptable to you and the rest of the strike force. I want to proceed with the agenda as we have planned it and get quickly to the discussion period.
I'll just say this, I'll agree for you to proceed. I don't want to be used. I don't want my name to be used in something that really lacks the kind of justice that has been a hallmark of my life. I don't want to be played in some process to get somewhere where folks want me to go without me having real, or other people having real legitimate input in that. I got bombarded with preachers calling me after the town hall meeting, upset, ticked off, tried to get in, questioning what I was a part of. Now, that's what I can't have. I can't have my name damaged in that way.
Understood, Reverend Hagler, and appreciated. I'm going to go ahead and proceed with your agreement, and we'll come back to your pretty important statements. Nina, go ahead and put the slide deck up so I can walk folks through where we are. Okay, so we are in order. Next slide. Okay. We all know the ground rules, and we've been pretty consistent in recognizing them and being guided by them. And I'm going to expect, and I'm pretty confident that that will continue to be our operating procedure. Next slide. We will have opportunity. We've reserved 15 minutes at the end of the meeting for participation and input from folks in the public who are listening. We're up now to 68 persons. That's more than we've had at any previous meeting. I want to welcome all of you. There will be a period set aside in which you have an opportunity to put your comments in the Q&A function or in the chat, and to be put on the record if you so choose. There is a recording being made of these meetings, and it will be available at the end of the meeting with all the other links if you request it. Next slide. One of the things that I want to make sure we understand is that we are following a consensus-based decision-making process. I and my colleagues at Justice and Sustainability have been working on behalf of the charge given to the strike force by Mayor Bowser to try and arrive and guide us towards consensus-based recommendations. In doing that, we've also followed some of the open meeting requirements. Agendas have been posted 2 days before the meeting. Follow-up materials have been provided, and meeting summaries have been disseminated. Next slide. I want to speak a little bit again, as I have been in the most recent meetings, about this idea of consensus building. What consensus building in this particular case looks like is the ability of every strike force member to say that they are sufficiently satisfied. That's what the whole concept of broad acceptance translates into, that there is sufficient satisfaction with the recommendation as worded. It does not mean that every word in the recommendation reflects what any individual strike force member would like it to say, but it is acceptable, it is good enough, and makes it possible for the group, for the strike force as a whole, to be united around recommendations that it proffers. It also means that the strike force members, each strike force member feels that they can stand behind the recommendation, recognizing that other hands are going to touch it. This idea of consensus basically puts the idea of group solidarity before individual expression. And it's a way of helping to put power behind not only the recommendations, but the implications of the recommendations, knowing as we have that all of these recommendations, there's going to have to be a lot of attention given to operationalizing them and implementing them. So I want to make sure that we have kept this idea of consensus building at the forefront, especially now as we are coming very close to conclusion. Next slide. So we have disseminated the strike force meeting from August the 4th, the summary. I want to see if there are any questions or revisions or comments or corrections related to that summary at this time. Anyone? Okay, I'm going to assume that you've all given a glance, if not a thorough reading, to the summary, and we will adopt the summary as written. Next slide. All right, this is the charge to the strike force. We're all familiar with it. We're very close, I believe, to achieving the charge that Mayor Bowser put before us. And I believe that today we're going to get even closer. Next slide. All right, before I ask Tim to come up and make his presentation, Catherine, you put a question in the chat and I don't want to ignore it. I don't want anyone to think I'm ignoring Reverend Hagler. I don't want anyone to think I'm ignoring anyone. The reason why I chose not to address Reverend Hagler's concerns up front is that I basically believe that there is a period already set aside in the agenda for a large discussion. And that is something that I think will be a large discussion. And I think it would be more effective for it to take place there than at the beginning of the meeting. So it was a choice I made as the facilitator, but it wasn't made without a desire to make sure that it does get its own time and attention. So I hope that will be satisfactory to you and to all the other strike force members.
Thank you.
All right, Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Don. You know, as we talked about, there was a town hall meeting earlier this week. We wanted to make sure we created an opportunity for the folks that have not been attending these regular weekly strike force meetings, that we had an opportunity for folks just to remind them of what's going on. Because I think, as I mentioned to the strike force members before, The important part of the work that you all do is complemented by what the residents want to see as a part of this. And if we complete this process and folks don't feel like they had multiple different touch points to be able to engage with you all, then the report itself won't have the power that we want it to have. Additionally, as was said on the town hall, is that this is the start. This is an issue that's decades in the making, and we aren't going to solve it with 2 months. And so the reality is that we will be moving forward with this, and there will be multiple touch points after October 1st when this starts to roll out, where we'll be engaging, obviously with you all as the Strike Force members, but with the community as well, about how we operationalize this report and how we make it the most effective for everyone involved. And so with the report itself, the update that I was going to provide with you all today is that we received probably just under 1,500 comments, questions in the Q&A, emails, comments that were a part of the survey responses, and we've received more since then that we need to go through. But we've gone through all of the things, all of the Q&A from the town hall and all of the survey comments. And what we learned was there are some themes of what folks would like to see. And we've put them together and broke them out based upon the working groups that you all have been working in. And if we go to the next slide, I'll start to go through what those themes were that we find. What you also see is that the Strike Force, the ones that are highlighted in yellow, are the ones that didn't necessarily fit neatly in the recommendations that you all are going to be discussing here today. And so I wanted to make sure we highlighted the ones that may need some additional thought. None of them are very controversial or anything of that nature, but they may not just necessarily fit neatly in the recommendations that you all have already done. And so starting off with the preservation working group, the first one you'll see there is proactive resources for seniors. We've talked about that. What we saw was comments around estate planning, automatic homestead deduction, being able to, so for folks that don't necessarily know about homestead deduction, support for condominium associations and homeowners to preserve their property and become financially stable. Some that are still haven't fully come back from impacts of the Great Recession. Stronger accountability to improve the quality of homes, which is one that we haven't really talked about a lot, but more so the workmanship of the homes that residents are in, because flippers, builders may not have done what they should have done. Funding for heirs properties, we've talked about that quite a bit, but some of the things, I think, additional funding for families to dealing with the reverse mortgages that have been passed down to them, or siblings that need resources to buy out other siblings was actually oddly something that we saw pop up quite a bit in the survey responses. Jumping to supply, what you'll see is what we've talked about before: vacant property, folks that are abusing the rules and keeping property vacant. Increasing affordable homes. Folks want to make sure we have adequate subsidy to be able to purchase those homes, to lower the price, or that the district would be a part of partnerships that would build more affordable housing that folks can be able to get into. And then the last one for supply is allowing owner-occupied multifamily purchases, which we saw quite a bit in the survey, and several Strike Force members have brought that up about making sure our programs allow for folks to be able to do that if they want to purchase a multifamily building and live in one of the apartments, to be able to use HPAP and things for that. On the next slide, the financing group, where I think we had probably the most responses generally, but easily accessible resources for the home journey. And so that sounds a lot like frontdoor.ec.gov, but it also sounds like making that more efficient for people with more information, as we've already talked about, making sure it has resources for folks that are already homeowners, just informing them about the preservation. And then the other thing that popped up a couple times was making sure that CBOs, that they were, the staffing met the need of everyone that was looking. We see financial support there for middle income. That came up quite a bit as well. We saw a couple things in there in the survey about student loans, and thinking about the middle income folks that they make too much for our programs, but they still need down payment assistance support. They have other things like student loans that are not necessarily factored into their inability to purchase homes. These next three are ones that haven't really been talked about, but there was a theme there of investors. How do we make sure that residents are able to compete with investors? And so having more competitive rehab loans for families to be able to do that on their own, having savings programs for renters because they're paying so much in rent that they also don't have enough money to save to be able to become a homeowner, creating an online system for doing the home buyers courses. This was an interesting one where folks referenced the fact that they can get degrees online and everything else, but the web classes that they aren't as flexible for folks to be able to get 24 hours a day. They have to meet specific times. Why not have a system where they could take a course online the way we do for a lot of other things? The last two, improving efficiency of down payment assistance, that was probably the thing we saw the most in there because of how important that is. And then lastly, training that we require for realtors, lenders, and appraisers with using our programs. And then also a note that kind of trickled throughout there was improving diversity throughout those industries, especially with the appraisers. And so those are the slides that we took all of the things that we heard from the community and we tried to put that into this and highlight the things that, what this shows is that the strike force has been on the right track with a lot of their recommendations. But there are a few items here or there that don't necessarily fit nicely in the recommendations that you all have so far. And it's something for you all to think about as you all have your discussions today.
Thank you, Tim. All right, we're going to have a discussion. The floor is open. Councilmember Bonds, good to see you.
Thank you very much. And I missed the last meeting. I was on travel, but and therefore I probably don't know the answer to this that I'm asking, which is, when did the town hall meeting take place? How were people invited to participate? And what was the number of participants ultimately?
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. Yes, so we worked with our partners. Those were emailed out to through many different listservs, through community associations listservs. It went out to what we saw somewhere around over 150,000 contacts through some of the internal government networks that we know for sure because we know the size of those. But we also shared it again with our partners. Many of the Strike Force members sent it out on their networks. I know my civic association in Congress Heights sent it to me as well, learning about what's going on. And so social media and all of those different platforms were used to be, as well as some text messages went out through our mayor's office of community affairs directly to residents. Regarding the actual attendance, I think we had at its peak, I think the attendance somewhere around 225 folks were a part of the virtual town hall. And so we had a pretty sizable attendance for a community meeting. But our hope again is that this is not the end of the discussion. This is the start of the discussion. And so folks that don't necessarily feel like they had an opportunity to speak, they can continue to submit things to us through the survey, where we're up to 1,400 responses, so another 200 since last Friday. And we hope to continue to hear from them as this process goes through all.
Thank you very much, Tim. So I therefore should assume that the council was notified and asked to spread the word. Is that correct?
I'm sure we sent emails out. I can double check to see who all the emails went to, but I know that there were some council staffers that were aware of it, so I think we worked that network as well.
Okay, I didn't get anything. Okay, so I was a little concerned, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member. Reverend Hagler.
Yeah, I sort of sharing Councilmember Bond's concern, because The Wednesday Clergy Fellowship was on there en masse, asking questions. And I know numbers of pastors from Wynn were on there asking questions. The questions felt filtered. The interaction was nil. I'm not saying somebody intentionally did that, so don't take it as a personal attack. But what I'm saying is that way it played out as a monologue. For me, it felt like I was being steered towards some answers and not necessarily the questions that were being asked. That somehow there was a preconceived notion of where we were going, and therefore what questions we were going to take in and take into account and what was going to be ignored. And I got a problem with that. I got a problem with the lack of interaction in a so-called town hall meeting. That wasn't a town hall meeting, it was a meeting, but it wasn't a town hall meeting.
So I appreciate that concern that you have there, Reverend Hagler. I think one of the things that, in a finite period of time and making sure that the feedback that we got from the community, because what we wanted to make sure we had a productive conversation. So we structured the conversation around solutions. And while there may have been people that in the chat, they voiced their frustrations about things that they've seen over the years in our housing industry. Some spoke of it when we got called on them to speak. We wanted to make sure as many people were heard as possible. But the reality also is that when we hear that feedback, we accept it, and then we try to operationalize it into a solution. And so we framed the discussion where we were asking very specific questions about the programs and about and they were fairly open-ended questions as well. And so we got open-ended responses. And what I also want to make sure we're clear on is that all of the questions that's one of the reasons why we expressed it in chat. We weren't going to be able to get to everybody. We were not going to be able to call on everyone. We needed to make sure that there was a finite amount of time that we could be on that call. We heard from residents as much, if not more, than we heard from the panelists.
Yeah, but I have no idea that that's the case. I have no idea that that's the case because the chat was closed down most of the time. It was disabled most of the time. And even I heard that the question and answer was disabled some of the time. So I don't know.
So that's not accurate. I just want to make sure. So I want to make sure, since we are having a public meeting and I want to make sure that's very clear on the record. The chat is not where we were asking people to put their information. We asked them to put it in the Q&A. The Q&A was never down. The chat was not where we were asking people to put information. And during the meeting, we made that very clear to residents. Put your comments and your questions in the Q&A, and we will respond to it. If you saw on there, we received about 200 responses in the Q&A. Anna and I,
I never saw that.
I know you didn't.
That's a statement.
I just want to make sure I make it clear. I'm making this clear because I want to make sure this is clear on the record for everyone. When you click the Q&A button, you can see how many questions were there. You can see what questions we're answering. You can even see where we typed in responses to that. During the meeting, we got to about.
Excuse me, I pushed the question answer button and none of that showed up.
All right, let me intervene here because what we've got now is a conversation between the two of you. I'm thinking that this is going to have to be resolved offline because there's clearly a difference in point of view and experience here. That's not going to go away. And so what I want to do is recognize, and I think the record will reflect that there is a different way in which Reverend Hagler and Tim and others have probably experienced this, the town hall. And okay, that's how it is. I don't think we can, however, afford from the standpoint of the strike force's charge to not proceed with our agenda. And this was one item, and I'm not trying to dismiss it, but I do want to get through the rest of the material that's been prepared in hopes of making sure that we meet the charge that we've been given as a strike force.
Right. If I may just say this, Don, I don't want to throw dispersions at anybody because I know everybody is doing the best that they can. I think that part of what I'm trying to raise is where it felt like to me, that's all I can say. It felt like
Yes,
to
sir.
me that we missed the mark, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm saying
Yes.
in terms of the statements that are being made, I cannot confirm those statements from my own experience. Right?
Understood, sir.
And so
Understood.
I say that.
Yep. I don't think there's any lack of recognition and respect for the fact that you're speaking accurately about your experience. That said, I would still want us to move forwards. I do Sasha's hand is up, so I want to respect that. But I would like for us to finish this part of the agenda and move into the rest of the meeting. Sasha?
Yeah, I mean, I took part in the town hall. I presented on the first panel, and I just feel obligated to just say that that my experience, I wasn't there, it was just a very sort of transparent process for me on that first panel that we presented. And there were several questions taken from the residents during that conversation. So I'm, understand Reverend Hagler's, respect his experience. I just feel obligated to at least speak about my experience and just to say that this is all sort of taken me by surprise.
Okay. Thank you,
And
Sasha.
Don, I just want to make one quick note. I think from perspective, and one thing I think we may realize here on this Zoom today, questions that come in the Q&A, all panelists can see all of the questions as they come in. However, if you're not a panelist, it's more of a Zoom functionality thing. You can't see those questions until they are answered from a resident perspective. And so it may look like there weren't 200, and this is also to answer Catherine's question that's in the chat. There may not look like there were 200 questions because if she was on there as a viewer and not a panelist, she wouldn't have seen those until they were answered. And so again, we only got to answer in the chat about 40 of the 200 live. And so that is why we've taken the time to read through all of them and put them in front of you all here today, because we want to make sure that is part of your discussion.
Yeah, well, let me say this. We will. I'm gonna try and satisfy the needs of the strike force, but I have to say that at a certain point, I hope everyone will recognize that this is not going to be resolved today. There's not going to be an agreement reached about that experience. Everybody had a different experience. And to some extent, I think we just have to be mindful of the larger challenge that we're trying to resolve and address. The town hall was an event. It could have been better, certainly could have been worse. So I want us to not lose perspective if we can keep our eye on the prize. Brenda.
Yes, hi. I wasn't at the town hall, and so I'm not going to speak to that. I do want to get to the points, though, that I think the larger points that Reverend Hagler is making is that obviously there was an event, and the event that some people felt they didn't have the opportunity to fully participate in, and that apparently there's some voices that still need to be heard, and perhaps some recommendations and some input that would be beneficial to the strike force. So my question is, was there an opportunity to invite that some additional participation in whatever forum there could be within the next week or so as we're rounding out or winding up our work as a strike force? I think that is the main point, right? It's not everything. We can't go back and fix what happened or change what happened. But if the point, Reverend Hagler, is that you felt that there were voices who didn't get heard, comments and recommendations that at least didn't get a chance to be aired and considered by the task force, the strike force, I are there other ways, Tim, since you're handling the community engagement, or Don, in terms of a facilitator standpoint, that those voices and input can be heard? Reverend Hagler, I've been in meetings with you and with our finance committee, and and I think we have been able to pull in our best thinking and those who who we represent or who we're affiliated with, and I think that's been for me the beauty and the integrity of this process. And I would not, towards the end of the day, want us to want anyone, and particularly our co-chair, to feel as though the process is not a fair process, knowing that not everything that's recommended is going to go forward. So that's what I'm asking at this point. Is there room to have that additional input and to make sure that the table is broad enough so that we are considering other recommendations and other voices?
Thank you, Anna. I'm sorry. Thank you, Brenda. I'm going to call on Anna.
I appreciate the feedback that we're receiving on the town hall. And so, trying to make sure that we can reflect a process that does incorporate everyone's perspective as best possible. So we can certainly consider another event. The question is how soon or when in the process it makes sense to do so. We can certainly try to do something in the next week before our last meeting on Thursday. Another possibility is after the recommendations are finalized, is to also have a process in which the public can weigh in later after the report is completed. That would also give people an opportunity to say, yes, this speaks to my concerns, or no, this is missing. And it gives the broader context to both the work and the data and the research, as well as the efforts that have gone up to this point. And the last thing I would say is, part of the reason that Tim is sharing sort of the feedback, that kind of giving a summary of what was heard, is to ensure that people understand that how we want to make sure that we are incorporating the public's feedback. We've been doing so from the beginning. We've had emails that have come in. We've been doing surveys online, and as Tim mentioned and discussed, we had 1,200 respondents to our online survey that we shared the results publicly with at the town hall, and that survey continues to be open and continues to receive additional feedback. So generally speaking, I would say it has always been our interest to ensure that all voices are collected, and that's what Tim has been trying to share in this conversation. We understand that it didn't meet everyone's expectations, but certainly there are additional opportunities that can be created to make sure that people feel that this work does represent their particular perspective.
Karima.
Yes, I just want to chime in and support the recommendation posed by Director Donald. I do think that the strike force should consider giving space and room for additional feedback for those that may not have felt that they were heard during the town hall prior to the report being finalized. And so whatever the mechanism that looks like, whether it's another town hall that's scheduled next week or the week thereafter, I do think that it's something that we should give space and room for.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. I think all of these are on point, and I'm sure they're going to be part of conversation that takes place after we have the final, the supply working group meeting this afternoon. I don't think anyone on this strike force and anyone in these meetings is not aware of the seriousness of what has been discussed And I'm pretty certain that there's going to be a serious attempt to rectify whatever failings and dissatisfaction exists today. With that, I'm going to ask Nina, and now if you pull up the next slide, I'm going to now move into our next agenda item, which is goal setting. I'm going to go to Anna.
Thank you, Don. As you all are aware, we have been asking you to deliberate on a number that the district should be striving for in increasing home ownership in the district. We've had some very good conversations over the last couple of weeks, and it appears that we may be leaning towards consensus on a number goal, and so that is what's going to be presented to you here for final discussion and an approval to move forward. And so if you can go to the next slide. At the last meeting, it was discussed, and it seemed that people were moving behind to support a goal by 2030 of 20,000 net new units and a larger goal of 30,000 by 2040, recognizing that 2030 is a very short time frame, and that this is a longer term challenge that needs to be that needs more time and opportunity to be addressed. And so with that, Don, I don't know if you want to kind of jump in and get people's reactions.
Yep. Thank you very much, Anna. I would just add that, last week and in the preceding weeks, we've been heading through a pretty in-depth discussion. And last week, you may recall, and looking at the summary, you may remember that we talked about the ambition, the aspiration, as well as the practical challenges. And so it was Director Cozart who introduced this idea of allowing us to be more successful as a city by introducing the idea of a 2030 goal and a 2040 goal. The 2030 goal represents something that I kind of gave a label to. Didn't mean a thing that I gave it to, but this idea of a little bit more than parity, parity plus. That's how we got to the 20,000. And then, of course, what it does is it sets out a course between 2030 and 2040. So really what we're talking about is the next, 15 to 17 years that allows us to seriously align the activities of government, the activities of non-governmental actors in a way that allows us to, I think it was Chris Donald who talked about making sure that we can really be engineers of success. And so I'm just going to go through without asking each task force member to go on the record at this moment. I'm going to ask a broader question in the interest of time. Is there anything that someone who is a strike force member feels is needed to be added to all of the words that have already been stated in all of the meetings we've already had? I'm basically seeking a reading. I'm looking for the strike force's appetite to approach the request on the mayor, to approach addressing the mayor's request with this kind of an answer. Is there anyone who feels that they can't at this moment be satisfied with this response? Brenda.
Yes, I'm a little hesitant about the expanded goal or the double goal. Like, I'm assuming that we're going to put together a plan with the recommendations to get us to a goal. So all of the recommendations, this implementation plan, are there going to be recommendations and plans, another set to get to 2040 goal, or is it the assumption that the recommendations that we are considering will allow us to hit 20,000 in 7 years, and then they just compound so that we get another 10,000? I don't understand how we're going to quantify recommendations tied to these goals, particularly this a whole nother decade worth. That just seems like a round number.
So I see Director Cozart's hand is up, and I'm going to recognize her. Councilmember Bonds, if you just be patient with me. I wanted to give an answer, but I think Director Cozart spoke to what is the likely way that other hands are going to touch on this implementation and operationalization component.
So Director Donald, thank you for that, because I did want to, as I was looking at this, want to make sure we understood the ideas that you have. We have this aspirational goal of 20,000 net new homeowners it's net new homeowners, and want to make sure that we understand it's aspirational. We've talked about it as a strike force, that it's aspirational, and that the idea is that that we are building through the next 7 years, building ourselves up to get towards 30,000 net new homeowners, Black homeowners. And that is the focus that we have, understanding that because we had a conversation a few weeks ago about goals, and really wanting to strive for that 30 by 30, and really understanding the challenges related to that, and that we are building in the first several years to get ourselves on an accelerated path. And so that, I hope that provides a little bit there. Obviously, the first several years we've been talking about are going to be ones where we have to put new programs in place. We have to pass legislation. We have to, set up some things, even while we're making improvements to existing programs that are going to get us started on that trajectory towards the 2030 goal. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. If it doesn't, talk back to me.
Councilmember Bonds.
Yes, thank you. I certainly embrace the goals, but I think it has to be with the proviso that we have a thriving economy and community support. And of course, as Ms. Cozart just mentioned, new laws that allow for moving in this direction. Again, I just have to mention that I have gotten a number of calls at my office about why just for Black ownership, why not for everyone? This is America. So I just wanted to remind us of the medium in which we are operating, and also how important this goal is as we're attempting to set it, and how meaningful it can be for the entire community.
Thank you, council member. That has been a conversation piece throughout the most recent meeting. So I thank you for bringing it up. I think Karima, you were before Reverend Hagler. I hope I'm right about that, but that's the order. Karima and then Reverend Hagler.
Thank you. I just have a clarifying question, and I recognize I was not at the Strike Force meeting last week, but the goal reads net new units and not necessarily net new homeowners. And so I don't know if there was a shift in language there, if it was intentional, but some clarity around that would be helpful.
I think you've got it right. It is supposed to be homeowners. So thank you for that. That edit will be put in the parking lot. Reverend Hagler?
She said exactly what I was going to say. You're talking about units and not homeowners.
I think it was unintentional, but thank you both for calling it out. Others, anyone else? So there's been some more input, some additional things have been added to the parking lot, but I'm still going to ask, what is the appetite? What is the degree of comfort with this approach to addressing the question, the charge that Mayor Bowser has made? Drew, and then Reverend Hagler.
So I think building on the previous discussion on how we got to these as potential goal numbers, and we've had this from the beginning, kind of what comes first, kind of in a euphemism, the chicken or the egg. I think having this in front of us now as numbers to work towards at both these dates, and I think there was a question, is this a cumulative goal? I think it was already explained. We are trying to get 20,000 net new Black homeowners by 2030 and an additional 10,000 by 2040. And just for the record, again, part of the discussion is taking into account reversing the trend of the number of Black homeowners that are currently migrating out of homeownership in the district. So it is a net number. So we're erasing the losses we're currently experiencing and adding additional on top of that to get to 20,000 new. So it's really more than 20,000 to erase the current losses. I'm comfortable with this as a path forward. And again, I won't go backwards, we're working with this number to inform the set of recommendations and how we implement it, as well as the attendant resources that are going to be needed to really make this a reality.
Thank you, Drew. Reverend Hagler?
I didn't have anything set out to say.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? I'm going to interpret, therefore I'm going to interpret the lack of, okay, Catherine.
I'm sorry, I missed a couple of things, but I just want to say that I'm fine with the 2030 goal. I'm less fine with the 2040 goal, even based on what everybody has said, primarily because I think it's a different, we won't know what we know in the next few years in terms of that goal. And I just feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's almost like a feel good, like, okay, we're going for 20,000, but don't worry, we're going to try to get other, and we don't really know so much about the 2040 goal. So I think we agree and we should, I'm sorry, you said we don't have to agree, but we should come to consensus around the 20,000 for 2030, which was our charge. And I feel like we don't need to hedge it. Just my thoughts.
Rima.
I actually would agree with Catherine. I recall, the conversation that we had around having two sets of goals, not just a 2030 goal and a 2040 goal. As I'm seeing it on the screen, I think at the end of the day, it is going to be challenging based upon what we've discussed as a strike force to reach the 2030 goal, not to mention the 2040 goal. And I think that there's going to be a lot of lessons learned between now and 2030. And there could be some revisiting at some point of the goal to expand it to 2040, but to present both goals as is, I think are a little less palatable for me.
Suzanne? Suzanne, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was thinking the opposite. It's going to be a Herculean task to even get the machinery up and running to reach anything like 20,000 net new units by 2030. This is a very short period of time and a very big number. And the number of resources that are needed and programmatic changes, and actually a lot of cultural and educational challenges. So I honestly feel more comfortable with the 2040 perspective because it's going to, we're trying to make a generational change. And I think if we talk about just 7 or 8 years, we're not really expressing the fact that we have an Herculean task with that is indeed going to take us at least to 2040. And I'd like to make it large and profound change. And I think putting 2040 in there shows the seriousness of wanting to make that long-term change.
Okay, we are now moving towards a different agreement. So if we were to separate, we were to revise this sentence so that we would say the 2030 goal of 20,000 net new homeowners, period. And remove the 2040 goal of 30,000 net new units. What is the comfort in the strike force with that being a satisfactory response to Mayor Bowser's charge?
It should say new Black homeowners.
Okay. Let's agree to put that in there. But I'm looking for a fundamental signal that if that is the answer, 2030 goal of 20,000 net new Black homeowners, period. I'm looking to see if there's any discomfort with that. Drew.
I have discomfort with that. I think the point is we're not stopping on December 31st, 2030. This has to go into the future and has to continue. And we have to signal that some kind of way. So I'd be for leaving the 24 goal in.
Joanne.
For leaving it in too, I almost think of it as, if we're trying to run a 10K, we want to hit, here's what we want to hit on our first lap mark. But if we don't hit that first lap mark, we're still going and trying to get our final time in.
Brenda.
I think if we, I'm assuming we're going to couch the goals with the rationale for the number, right? So if was, I'm kind of asking this, but hoping it, if it's the 20,000 that would reflect some incorporation of net new homeowners, incorporating or mitigating the loss, as well as moving towards parity, then I think the assumption, so we have, I think in the legislation that there was supposed, isn't 2030 part of the strike force legislation? So that date was set. So there's some expectation that we want to get to a certain place by 2030, does not suggest that we're not going to keep going. And so if the overall goal is to stem the losses of Black homeowners and achieve parity, then we would say, and then we would hit 20,000 by 2030 and continue until we achieve that. But I think just coming up with another number, 10,000, it's like a made up number and it's not tied. I mean, to me, it just rings hollow rather than saying, we have, here's the aspiration and we're going to get to a certain point by 2030. And then all of the programs and policies and legislation that we're putting into effect is with the goal of achieving parity or whatever the term would be that would address the ultimate aspiration.
Okay, Karima.
Just to build off of that, I think the way the language is a bit confusing because we're saying that by 2030, the goal would be an additional 20,000 net new Black homeowners. And it reads as 2040, a goal of 30,000 net new homeowners. However, it's more an additional 10,000 of net new homeowners by 2040. So the way it reads for me begs more questions than answers. And I'm a bit concerned about whether the recommendations actually support us getting to the goal. And I know that that's been a question of mine throughout. And so I would just want to make sure that the recommendations and the plan gets us to the goal, not just in 2030, but if we agree that an additional 10,000 is what we're striving for by 2040, that those recommendations support that goal as well.
Councilmember Bonds?
Thank you. This discussion really it causes me to share with everyone a fact that we need to embrace, and that is, if you think about the Housing Production Trust Fund, there are goals there, and I changed one of the goals to make it a little more extreme in order to be aspirational. And I'm taking that term from you, Don, and the aspirational goal became the goal. And the council, the city is held to that goal. The agency is held to that goal, even though the idea was that it would inspire the production of the greater production at 0 to 30%, where it had been determined 10 years ago the need was. And now here we are today, where, you know, there's this constant push that it must be done this way. And therefore we've left out the middle, you know, the missing middle, as we call it. So I would just suggest that if we say this is our aspirational goal, with the understanding that, you know, on a annual basis, we will be producing till we get to this aspirational, or reach this aspirational goal and going even further. I mean, something like that, I think, would begin to be more realistic when we talk to the community.
Okay, we've gotten a lot of comments here. We might as well see if there's anybody else who has a comment, because we are not in agreement on this quite yet. And so obviously we'll have to do some more work with it, which means trying to come up with a new statement of the goal and bring it to the body. Anyone else? Okay. All right, Drew.
Just in that vein, can we just at least get to agreement on the first part, that the 2030 goal is 20,000, and then we can have further discussion on if there needs to be a comma or a period.
Reverend Bowen.
Yes, I'm glad that we pointed out that we need to put better language and humanize it by saying Black homeowners, in which case, of course, we know is capital B. I'm good with the consensus of 20,000 new Black homeowners by 2030. I'm thankful that someone pointed out that the 2040 goal should be 10,000 additional new Black homeowners. But I think it's important for folks to know that we're not counting beans, that just as we have a goal for 2030 and a goal for 2040, the goal is parity. So I'm wondering if there's a bullet needed to say until we're able to reach and maintain parity.
So Reverend Bowen, I think, someone please correct me, but I think the idea of 20,000, and if I recall, it was, no, it wasn't Harrison,
it was Sheila. Parity plus, it was parity plus.
Parity plus, the 20,000 is actually above parity, just a little bit.
You know, the thing about this whole conversation is that it's so nebulous and it's so murky, and there's so many different people's opinions and takes on it. It's hard to really get your head around it realistically. So if you then say parity plus, then you are, I think, in the realm of where what is attainable. There's so many different aspects and forces that that pertain to reaching this goal that, in my opinion, I think that it's almost, you can snatch a number out of the air, but the reality of that number is, to me, a little far-fetched to actually try to formulate it into an exact number. Because then you put yourself in a position where you're saying, like the council member said, you're prescribing something that may or not be realistic, but then the council is going to be responsible for it. And then there may be some flashback, on it. So I think that to be safe, it's easier to, rather than grab a specific number, just to put it in the wording that it is parity plus, and not try to narrow it down to a specific number, because there's just too many different variables to actually consider.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, I am going to thank everybody for the input. I think it's apparent that we have more work to do here. So we're gonna we have 30 minutes left, more or less, 23 minutes. I've asked Anna to read through the draft recommendations, the iteration that was sent out Wednesday morning. The idea is to make sure that everybody sees that there is work being done to present a package. What I've also asked her to do is not present in the way that has been done in the working groups, which is to talk about all of the efforts that have been made to address the challenge that has already been offered, and presumably you all have read. What I can say is that it seems that we want to still preserve 15 minutes, so we've only got a few minutes, actually less than 10 minutes, to kind of just walk through these recommendations. But no attempt, I would recommend, to actually treat them as they are finished, or even near finished, because we have gotten a lot of additional work material to put in the parking lot. So with that, I want to ask Anna just to walk through the recommendations that you received yesterday morning. And I want to say that clearly what is also in front of us is the likelihood that some time may be added to the strike force's process in order to accommodate the earlier requests around another town hall, or some attempt to accommodate more public input, as well as provide the task force with a little bit more time to take all of the good work that it's done and come to a consensus around the recommendations it wants to make. We are, regardless of whatever else has not occurred with the satisfaction, we are very close. We have done a lot of very good and important work, and I think we need to proceed and keep our hearts full with the idea that we can get to where we need to get, and get it done, if not by the next Thursday, soon thereafter. Okay, Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Don. And to the latter point, I think the proposal we want to make to the strike force is that instead of having a strike force meeting next Thursday at 10 a.m. to actually reserve that for a town hall to get that feedback and ensure we have all perspectives heard, and then add another meeting the following week, the following Thursday, to finalize recommendations. So while you think about that, I'll quickly read the recommendation. So, and Don, you're saying not read the challenge, just go straight to the recommendation, correct?
Well, my sense is that we still got to reserve the 15 minutes. So that's why I'm saying it.
Okay. So the first recommendation states streamlining interfamily or to first-time home buyers transfer sales or slash sales of property for its full market value through incentives such as tax savings, reduced transfer fees, or a bridge loan to purchasers. Go to the next recommendation. Pass legislation to protect homeowners from unwanted solicitation by investors, real estate agents, and similar professionals regarding the sale or potential purchase of their homes by providing them with the option of cease and desist legislation or no solicitation zones and requirements for homeowners to opt in for such solicitation and include penalties for noncompliance. Next. Create a legacy fund to acquire long-held single-family homes to provide homeownership opportunities for first-time home buyers. Next. Offer homeownership opportunities for first-time homeowners using district-owned acquired properties, including but not limited to condominiums and cooperatives to be sold at the 1/3 model, which is at 1/3 is affordable, 1/3 for middle income, and 1/3 at market rate. Provide co-investment capital to residential developers that would give first-time homeowners priority in making first offer on developed single-family and multifamily home ownership units. Accelerate permitting for homeownership projects, especially for projects with pre-approved plans and/or affordable projects. Create a public-private partnership fund, i.e. a home ownership production trust fund, building upon the 10 million Black Homeownership Fund to leverage a total of 100 million with mixed income requirements that speak to the 1/3 model of 1/3 affordable at 80% and below, 1/3 middle income, 81% to 120, and 1/3 market rate. For different housing typologies, that includes single-family homes, condominiums, cooperatives for first-time home owners. Design and implement a marketing and communications campaign to increase and sustain first-time home ownership through enrolling residents in government and private home ownership programs. Increase the effectiveness of HPAP to compete with market through the following initiatives: establishing a certified lender pool for HPAP, increasing HPAP funding, automating the HPAP application process, streamlining underwriting guidelines with federal financing, and enhancing the customer experience. And the last one, create a comprehensive home ownership platform leveraging the district's front door website.
Thank you, Anna. Rather than introduce the recommendation period, I'm going to ask that we do the following. There is going to be a supply working group meeting today at 12. It is going to produce additional material for the parking lot. That parking lot material is going to inform the next iteration of the recommendations that you've just heard, which are now no longer current as a package. What I'd like to propose is that we produce that next iteration, given everything we hear by the end of the day, by 5 o'clock today. And then put that back out, send that document back out, and ask each of you to produce your red line document. And that red line document will be the most helpful way for us to now take all of those different red lines from you and combine it into a new and final, hopefully final draft. I'm going to assume, given what Anna has just previously said, that we're going to add an additional week, which would, by my calculations, mean that the task force will be in existence through Thursday, August 25th. And that will be the opportunity, that interim period will be the opportunity for shaping the final recommendations, the final drafts for approval by a consensus approval and adoption by the task force. Reverend Hagler.
Yeah, I was going to say that's something that needs to ride through all of this, because we're making an assumption And the assumption that we're making is that first-time home buyers are going to live in the property. That's not necessarily the case. Somebody can be a first-time home buyer and be an investor. So I think we got to really specify that we're geared towards people living in the property.
Thank you, sir. Sheila?
Done on some of the recommendations that we looked at yesterday, there were going to be some corrections. For example, one of them with the word compete, I can't remember exactly what the recommendation was. And another one was non-solicitation. We talked about the wording. However, I didn't see those corrections being made. They will be. Is everyone understanding that they will be made?
Yeah, we're not going to change anything until after close of business today, Sheila. We want to keep it open in order to receive the results from this meeting and the following working group meeting. But yes, a new iteration will be disseminated as soon as we've done that.
Thank you.
Joanne?
Thank you for a
This
moment,
will be
Don.
the last, I'm sorry, this will be the last comment because I want to open up the public period. And we do have some chat, some comments.
Yep. But I appreciate the moment because I want to throw this to the group because it's one problem I'm not sure I can solve in a red line. But similar to Reverend Hagler's comment, when we talk about opportunities for first-time home buyers, I know there's a lot of legal challenges around that, but I think we have a lot of, non-Black young professionals moving into the district, buying their first home. And so I know the intent, and I know we have to find a way to say it, but whether putting that, buying with HPAP, lower income. I also note that first-time home buyers might miss some of that missing middle we keep talking about wanting that goes from the condos to the, is maybe looking to move from a condo to a single family home. So we're reserving a lot for first-time home buyers and may have to put a little more detail on that to target it the way that we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann, I'm going to ask you to hold for a minute. We'll come back to you first, depending on what the response is in our public gallery. So now I'm going to open up the opportunity for public comment. And I want to thank all of you who have stayed in the presence. And there's 71 of you who I see are participating. And so I want to start and see what the JSA staff has. I see a number of different folks have commented.
Don, I can read them to you if that's easier.
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Okay, first one is from Courtney. Is there going to be consideration to supporting condo associations who are abandoned by their developers and have been left with newly built property with issues to the extent that they endanger the financial sustainability of the condo association? This impacts home ownership because many people's entry into home ownership is through condos. Many issues do not become apparent within the 2-year window. Owners have to get accountability from the developer. Homeownership does not end at the closing table.
Courtney, thank you very much for your question. I don't know if there is someone on the strike force. Drew, do you have an answer?
Yeah, I don't think we haven't hit that head on in the strike force, but there's legislation currently in the council, and we're having a separate set of discussions around condo support. But I mean, we've talked about condos and the need generally for preservation, generally for it to be a viable typography, I believe that's what we called it, typology of home ownership. So the idea of, yes, preserving existing, creating more condos and co-ops is part of the discussion. And there's some other legislative action that's in the works already talking about how to strengthen supports for condo owners.
Thank you, Courtney.
Okay, the next one is a question about the town hall. Will the Q&A portion of the town hall be sent out?
Yeah. Anna, you have an answer?
All right, coming off mute. Yes, we will be posting the questions that came through in town hall. They will be on the website. We're working to upload the actual town hall as well.
Thank you.
Our next comment, I believe this was addressed a little bit a couple minutes ago, but can the task force amend the process and timetable to prioritize Reverend Hagler's concerns over a self-imposed deadline? More events are needed.
I think the answer to that is yes. Anna, is that right? I think that would be the answer. Anna, that's a question for you.
Sorry, I was shaking my head in agreement, but yes.
Thank you.
Our next one asks, will additional recommendations be accepted? I have a concern regarding grandparent housing for grandparents program.
I think the answer to that is yes. We've already accepted and been accepting recommendations. That was what the town meeting did, and I think we're going to continue to accept recommendations that come in.
Okay, the next is more of a suggestion. If we have another town hall, you can allow all the time for audience Q&A with no panelists.
Thank you for that recommendation. I'm sure it's going to get a lot of consideration.
The next comment asks, would that be an aggregate of 50,000 units or by 2040 or 50,000 net new homeowners by 2040?
No.
Reverend Hagler, go ahead and speak up.
No, it's not. It's the aggregate is 30,000.
Danita, did I see your hand up?
I put it up, but my co-chair provided the appropriate clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question, perhaps I'm not understanding the funds, but $10 million divided by 20,000 homeowners is only $500 per. Is more funding coming?
If I may chime in here, I think the intent, and we've talked about this in Strike Force meetings, is try to leverage resources from even non-government sectors. And so that 10 million is just seed funding. It's not, we're not expecting to be able to, we know we cannot accomplish our goal with just $10 million. So we'll need to have more combination of both city dollars plus dollars from other resources as well.
Thank you.
Okay, next one, what can be done in the short term? Increasing capacity of the current system. I fear that by 2030, there will be many potential Black homeowners who will give up and go to Maryland.
That's part of the approach, especially with HPAP, and I appreciate the conversation from yesterday about expanding that out to include other existing programs. We want to be aspirational with new tools, but at the same time, we know the short term of that is refining and maximizing the tools we have now. So, we'll have a number of kind of tiered pieces to the rollout. And to your point, the existing system is in very, very important that we get to work on that, to streamlining current programs and expanding current programs right now.
Thank you.
Okay, and our next question, are you going to provide support to families fighting to keep family homes? I've been steep elder care costs led to the loss of 2 family homes in my husband's family. This is part of how Black families lose opportunities to build wealth.
Preservation is one of our distinct working groups for that purpose, to make sure, again, we're not painting the full picture, doing our job, but we just talk about new opportunities. We need to, and we've talked about, and we'll have recommendations on preserving current homeowners also, structurally, tax-wise, keeping homes and families. So yes, all those are on the table to make sure that current Black homeowners are protected also.
Thank you, Drew.
Okay, our next one, do you envision a role for community land trusts?
I hate to keep chiming in, but a lot of this, especially current things, fall kind of in my wheelhouse. Yes, and we actually have Ms. Slater, who was involved in current community land trust homeownership activities. So it's definitely one of the tools and approaches towards the supply side of this too.
Drew, thank you. I think we want to all say thank you for everyone who's here and responding, because we want to show that there is responsiveness, and we've got a lot of, deciders here. So I'm glad that you're here. Evelyn Moore?
There are 4 more questions.
Okay.
Will the presentation slides be provided to attendees?
Yes.
There is a recording that can be accessed. You request it, and the request should go to who, Evelyn?
I believe, Anna, you were gonna.
Yeah, so Don, just to be clear, we have been putting all slides on the blackhome.dc.gov website, along with the minutes from all of our meetings, so people can access it there.
Say that again, Anna, a little slower.
So the presentations from each meeting, along with the minutes from each meeting, have been put on frontdoor.dc.gov.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Hagler?
I'll wait for a little bit. I'll wait.
All right. What
Yeah.
else, Evelyn?
Our next one, the average cost of a home in DC is over $700,000 with a goal of 20,000 net new Black homeowners by 2030. This equals 14 billion or 1.4 billion annually per year. What unconventional sources of funding are you looking at?
I think it's worth mentioning, we're by no means talking about funding the full amount of every home purchase. We're talking about mortgage products like NACA. We're talking about down payment assistance like HPAP, EHAP. We're talking about, to your other point, leveraging other private sources, engaging the banks that do this mortgage lending, engaging philanthropy. But we're not by any means suggesting we will fund the purchase of the full amount of every home.
Because that's one that's impossible to deal with. But the other thing that we are failing to deal with as the strike force is to address the whole thing of slowing down the speculation in the marketplace in DC that's driving up the price of housing. We haven't done that. We've avoided that. We shouldn't avoid that. We should do it.
Thank you, Evelyn. Next.
Okay, one more. In the event of potential legal challenges to the recommendations, etc., would it be proper to invite the Attorney General's opinion?
So we have already been working alongside our legal counsel as these recommendations are being drafted, and we will continue to do so to ensure that these recommendations can move forward in whatever final form they reach. And I do want to say a correction. Apparently I said that the slides and minutes are on Front Door DC. I meant to say blackhome.dc.gov. So just want to make sure I corrected that.
Okay, Evelyn, anything else?
We have one just comment, thanking everyone for the transparency of the process.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for saying so. Okay, Reverend Hagler.
I'll wait for, we finished with the public comment part. Are we finished with it?
There are no more questions or comments in the Q&A.
And Reverend Hagler, I'm just going to go ahead and give you and Anita now your opportunity to make the closing remarks because we're actually out of time.
Okay. Director Cozart.
I'm actually would like you to go first, if you would, Reverend Hagler.
Okay. I was told that an amendment that I wrote was somehow incorporated into the recommendations. It entirely disappeared. And that's one thing. And the other thing in terms of the recommendation, there's the continued reference to developers. That's always been the problem because there's been straws that have always been in the mix. And so we got to really look at this with some real surgical eyes And I got to look at the process personally with some kind of perceptiveness that tells me whether this is actually incorporating the voices and the perspectives of everyone or not. And I hope it is, and I pray that it is. And I pray that if it's not, we can get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Hagler. And I want to personally appreciate you for pushing us to make sure we're giving an appropriate critical eye as we start to bring the strike force's work to a close over the coming weeks. Clearly, the strike force's work is just the beginning of what needs to happen to get towards the ambitious goals that we're talking about. And so I would just encourage us all as strike force members to do that critical eye, look carefully at the next round of recommendations once they are revised and circulated. And I would invite all of you, if you've got a question, I would invite all of you to personally give me a call. I'm making myself available for conversations about this because it is, I'm in alignment with Don's urging of us to come to consensus and want to make sure that we have the level of readiness and excitement about the set of recommendations and about the goals that we were charged to make as a strike force. So again, thank you for your work thus far. We still have more to dig in on and invite us all to do that last bit of work that we need to do to make sure that this reflects the best of the values that we have and share together. So thank you all.
Okay, this has been a great meeting, and this is why I will say that. I know that everyone in the strike force was put on it because they are actually seasoned public, not officials, but public leaders, public participants, public actors. And because I know that all of you have that experience, I know that nobody is surprised with the intensity of attention that's being given to the details, that's being given to the process or to the policy implications of the strike force. It was a bold move, in my opinion, for the mayor to convene it. And it was a bold move on each of your parts to accept the invitation. Having accepted the invitation, you've accepted that you got to go through what we're going through. And I'm pretty confident that you all understand that the real issues we're dealing with were put in place probably before most of us were born. Even those of us who are the most senior on the strike force. We are deconstructing and addressing problems that go back many, many generations. And so I am not dismayed or disconcerted by where we are. We are in sight of our finish line. If you look at the totality of the material that we have in front of us, especially once we revise and reiterate all of the recommendations, I think you're going to find that we have absolutely met our historical responsibilities. And I just want to encourage everyone to keep their eyes on the prize, as I have said before. This was never going to be easy, but it can be important. And it's worth the effort we are putting into it. And as the facilitator and the person who's helped with the processing, I hope that you will stay engaged. Don't let this be an opportunity for you to say, I knew this was going to happen. No, you didn't. And you have an opportunity to overcome forces that have been arrayed against Black homeownership for a long time. Don't forget that. This is the opportunity. And this is the moment. and I want to encourage you to stay engaged. We do have a working group meeting in about 20 minutes, so go do what you got to do. And we will continue to be back in touch with you, and I want to thank you all. We are adjourned for today.